A very good afternoon to all of you. Good morning for those in UK and wherever you are. Welcome to this webinar. And this webinar is specifically about special issues on COVID-19. We know the impact of COVID-19 on so many aspects of our life, of our work, and we are grateful to have this webinar to discuss all its implications, especially from the perspectives of the guest editors whom we have invited today. Now, before we begin with the presentations by the speakers, a few things to take note. There will be 4 topics today. The first will be about the aims and scope of the special issues. The second topic will be about publishing plan and experience towards publishing success in index journals. The third topic will be about attributes that make a paper publishable from the author and reviewers' perspectives. And the last would be about research, publication, and making a real impact on the society. So our 4 speakers will present their special issues, their journals, and how submissions can be made to these special issues, to these journals. So these 4 topics will be very, very important. I believe it is something timely for all the participants, especially those in ASEAN countries, to consider submitting papers to these journals, to these special issues. COVID-19 is not a small thing, even though the virus can be something very, tiny. But like I said, the effect is immense. We definitely need collective effort, putting together our knowledge, our resources, our experience to weather this pandemic together, and hopefully we will overcome. Things will improve, and we will learn lessons from here and to be better prepared for the future. Anyway, a few things for housekeeping. I'm the moderator for this session today. By the way, my name is Hiram. I'm currently the ambassador at Emerald Publishing in East Asia region. It's my privilege and honor to be a moderator, to moderate these sessions to discuss about COVID-19 insights from the special issue guest editors. Your video, your audio are all muted, so you don't have to try to open your video and your audio. But don't worry about the materials. Whatever the speakers present today, all these materials will be made available to you 3 days after the event. The video, the link will also be sent to you 3 days after the event, and also the certificate of participation, attendance, will also be sent to you via email 3 days after the event. If you have any questions on anything related to the presentation from the speakers, feel free to write your questions on the dashboard. We may not have time to go through every question, but we hope we have time, at the end of the webinar to answer a few. Now, this webinar would not be possible without, first of all, Emerald Publishing for hosting this meaningful webinar to disseminate knowledge, to perpetuate discussion about the implication of COVID-19 on so many areas of our life and our work. Our gratitude also to all our partners, Sarawak Research Society from Malaysia, Research Synergy Foundation from Indonesia, based in Indonesia, Asia Pacific Consortium of Researchers and Educators, Philippine Higher Education Research Consortium based in the Philippines. But of course, these associations have members throughout the world, especially in ASEAN countries. Towards the end of the webinar, we will hear a few words from from the representatives from these organizations. Now, before we begin with the presentation, we would like to invite senior publisher from Emerald, Joe Jones, to give a few words. Joe, are you there? Joe, are you there?
Sorry, Dr. Hiram.
She's not here yet?
She's not here yet. You can just move on.
All right. So it's okay. Perhaps she can give some concluding words if she comes in later. Now let me introduce all the honorable speakers for the webinar today. The slides will be given to all of you 3 days after the event. So I would not want to read. They are all experts. That they need little introduction. But anyway, the first speaker, Professor Dr. Chi Yu Wong. He's a professor of supply chain management. He's currently working at Leeds University Business School in the UK. And he has published so many papers in high quality journals. So we would definitely like to hear from him, about the journal, about the special issues, and how to get our papers published in the special issue, which he will present later. The second speaker is Professor Dr. Samuel Foso Wamba. He's a professor in information system and data science in Toulouse Business School, France. I'm just reminded that Toulouse is the place where Airbus is manufactured. And also he will be sharing with us the special issues that he is editing. And definitely we would like to hear from him how to get our papers published in these special issues. Looking at his profile, he's also a very experienced researcher, and he has published so many papers in high quality journals. So again, we are so happy to have Professor Dr. Samuel with us today. The third speaker, Associate Professor Dr. Stephen McKenna, another seasoned researcher based in Perth, Australia. He's from Curtin University. Similarly, he is also very experienced in publishing. His areas of interest include global human resource management, organizational development, international mobility of professionals. So again, we definitely look into it because we know COVID-19 has impacted workforce in a very profound manner. So we're happy that he's here to share his insights with us. Last but not the least, Dr. Stuart So. He's from Hong Kong, currently in the City University of Hong Kong, and similarly another experienced researcher, and he has published in many top journals, and his area is more on strategy and crossover to operations, technology and supply chain management, consumer behavior and sustainability, business assets, so on and so forth. Again, we would definitely look forward to hearing from him his insights about publishing papers in a special issue in the journal that he is currently editing. Now, without further ado, we would like to begin with our first speaker today, Professor Dr. Chi Yu Wong. Professor Dr. Chi, you are given 15 minutes to present, and I will remind you to wrap up when you have 2 minutes left. Over to you, Dr. Chi.
Thank you very much, Professor Think. May I have the next slide, please? Today, I would like to talk about a special issue from journal I edit. It is called International Journal of Physical Distributions and Logistic Management. It's a long name, in short, IJPDLM. On the right-hand side of the slide, you can see the journal has a high impact factors. We are one of the oldest logistic and supply chain management journals in the world, and we are one of the highest ranked journals as well. You can see also on the right, this special issue is edited by a group of people from different parts of the world, including Dr. Shades up to Raman from China, and myself and Dr. Chabel from Leeds, Lincoln in the UK, and then we have also guest editors Abbas from North America. The topic for the special issue is supply chain and technology innovation. So we know that there are many companies who have changed, adopted new practices and also new technology to cope with the COVID for managing the logistics and supply chains. And this is the way you can contribute to the general special issue. Now, we do not want papers that tell us only all the impacts of COVID-19, but we want to see how companies organize themselves, learn new things, and why they adopted new practices, new technologies, how they create and deploy technologies. You can see bullet points there, all the topics that might fall into this special issue. Now, this is one of the special issues of COVID-19. We may have other special issues in the next year as well. Now, this one is focused on technology and innovation. Can I have the next slide? Now, I just use this special issue publishing plan to indicate to you how the journal operates. You can submit your papers starting from early October until the end of December. The closing is the 31st of December. And usually you get a feedback from the journal, whether it's special issue or regular issues, within 2 months, usually 1 month or 1.5 months. So by February, you get your first notification. And we will try to make sure that the papers that got through the first revision can have a chance to be published and going through maximum 2 more rounds of revisions. And therefore, we aim to finish and receive your final revisions by May or June 21st. And by the end of the year, the paper can be published. And our track record is that we always aim to publish a paper within a year after we receive it. And for this special issue, also for the IJPDM in general, the key success factors are 3. The first thing is when you finish writing a paper, ask yourself if a manager, in our case, logistics and supply chain manager, read your papers. Do they got to learn something new? And this new is insightful. Oh, I can do this. Oh, they have done that differently. Oh, yeah, this is how they solve specific problems, as well as informing policymakers sometimes, consultants and academics as well. Now, this new insight that can be useful for this paper must be grounded in theory, theoretical explanations or logical explanations that explain why things work the way they should be or that it is. And relatively to the literature, it has been novel, new understanding, not just from managerial perspective, but also from theoretical explanation perspective. So it has to be some level of originality when it comes to, oh, we haven't seen it, we haven't had these explanations, or we haven't had this perspective before. And of course, it has to be useful. And finally, the third criteria is that the papers must be based on legal data or reliable measurements, etc., and so on. All right, these are the 3 factors that governs the way we assess the papers. Now, can I move on to the next slide, which I will explain in a different perspective. If you want to get your manuscript rejected, these are the list of things you can do. Now, I don't meant to ask you to get your paper rejected, but I think this is the way you can actually learn how to avoid your manuscript being rejected, as a way to learn how to get your papers accepted. The first one, which is happening very, very often, is that you have a very exciting, useful work, but submitted the work to the wrong journal because they don't really like the kind of data you use or the method you use, or the scope of your studies. Like my journal is about logistics and supply chain management, and if I get a paper about finance, stock market management, it doesn't fit. And also in my journals, IJPDRM, we have some scope when it comes to methodology. We are not very good at mathematical modeling, operations research, and if you submit the papers like that to us, we also cannot appreciate. So learn about the journals, and the scope of the journals would help you to really, avoid being text rejected. And then the rest of the three reasons for rejected manuscript are very similar to what I asked when it comes to our expectations. The first question is there any novel understanding from two perspectives, from managerial application perspective, also from the literature theory perspective. You can see the first two bullet points elaborating this. But what is important for many management journals like ours is nuances, new understanding that would allow managers to do things quite differently. And in relative to the literatures, papers that actually briefly talk about some theory, some literatures, when do not really have deep appreciations of the arguments, logics, and evidence would also be rejected. And of course, there are many papers that tend to replicate some past studies with very minor modifications or incremental adjustment. That kind of replication studies sometimes can be useful, but most of the time are not really giving us any new insights. And of course, there are also some papers that try to develop or test hypotheses, but sometimes the hypotheses are very obvious. You don't have to test them, you know it. So in our case, for example, if a company has a higher resilient capabilities, there will be more resilience. This is a very obvious hypothesis that sometimes we get, and we do not actually see any insight from that kind of hypothesis. So it's actually not useful. Some papers also justify their hypothesis using past evidence. So assuming that there's one hypothesis where they have been tested and you have lots of evidence, and the big question is, why do you have to test it again? So all the question about novelty, what is new? The third bullet point here talk about the use of theory. In many management journals, especially leading management journals, the attention goes to how do you use theory, either your logical arguments or your explanations or the nuances that you can actually review out of your arguments. Now, we will prefer to see people going deep into nuances and not broad applications of theory. We would prefer to see papers that apply the theory instead of just say, I try to use X and Y theory, but not really applying the theory. Very typical examples of this is the use of resource-based view. Everybody say, I use resource-based view. But there are some nuances in the resource-based view, like the characteristic of resources, and some papers simply say any capabilities are well fit into the resource-based view and forget about these characteristics of the resources. That wouldn't actually help anyone to understand anything better. So these are questions about use of theory. And of course, there is also some questions about the fit between the theory with the data that you presented. Sometimes the data cannot tell the arguments of the theories, or the theories and cannot be tested by the analysis. For example, that is another question about use of theory. The last one, of course, is the rigor in methodologies. There are, of course, many different methodological problems that can occur, but the most common one is that some people come up with some concepts or measures that do not actually reflect the theory or constructs. That is very typical. And also there are some inductive qualitative research that tend to say they have done coding, they have hundreds of interviews, they have done coding, but if you look at the presentations, they are very descriptive at a very broad abstract level, and that means detailed coding has not been done. That's also one of the challenges that we face with manuscript that has potential as good data, but not being analyzed in depth. May I have the next slide, please? So what kind of manuscripts got attention from the editors or guest editors? Of course, there are many different types of papers, and so here I only list 3 types, not because I want to promote these 3 types, because these are the 3 types of papers we receive most frequently in my journal. So I can give you some feedback on that. Now, we got a lot of papers using literature review. They are conceptual in nature sometimes. They are basically 2 extremes. One extreme, you get literature review that tell us who got cited most and which years what papers are published and how many papers got cited or so on. These are descriptive of the past study. Question about who studied what is not really helpful in us understanding the phenomenon, the problems, right? So these are actually not very helpful, but we want actually use of literatures to really come up with new understanding, new method, theory, frameworks, or something that academic can use to further understand particular problems or phenomena. And there are also literature review papers that come up with a laundry list. So you go and study the barriers for resisting to COVID-19, and you come up with a list of barriers. Yeah, and then you come up with a list of enablers. That could be a good start, but that is not enough because there is no theory to actually explain why the barriers has certain effects. Why are they becoming barriers, etc. So that is also a problem when you do a literature review and come up with just long list of factors. All right. The other challenge we have is sometimes we use literature review to tell what sort of research we can do in the future, right? And there's a tendency to say, oh, I find out the literatures, they have studied X and Y topics, and Z topics has not been studied, so that's the gap. But that's not necessarily important. What is important is what we do not know, not what we have not studied. All right. And then we either move on to the right-hand side of the slides, and these are mostly empirical studies, qualitative or quantitative in nature. We really appreciate, especially qualitative data that can reveal lots of insights, rich data, interviews, case studies, observations, and that are really very useful for nuanced understandings. What is usually lacking is the analysis. I think the applications of data analysis and coding, as well as using the appropriate theoretical perspective of foundations to really transform the data into new insights in a way that managers and academics can appreciate and learn. So what we're looking for qualitative research is the data give us new way of understanding things. It could be new concepts that elaborate a particular behavior, attitudes, way of thinking, doing things. That would be the kind of things we are looking for. When it comes to quantitative empirical studies, the kind of papers we receive mostly test theory based on particular data sets. We want to avoid picking some constructs from different journals, put them together and just go test them and then think about the theory later. That's not the kind of papers we encourage. We want you to think about what kind of debates we have in academia about what is theory that can explain a phenomenon. Maybe there are 2 extreme views. In the managerial space, there will be managers who think, should I use this or that way of managing the COVID? Yeah, that kind of debates, that kind of maybe misunderstanding, not enough understanding is the one that you want to test for. And of course, it is important to think about the ability to review ways to transform managerial thinkings. That's the kind of thing that we want to focus on. Yeah. Next slide, please.
Professor Chi, you have 1 minute to wrap up your presentation.
Yeah, I will have the last one. Next slide. I want to take this discussion broader to just academic roles as a way to think about what we do in our research that can have real impact on the society. I received emails from some PhD students asking me what kind of projects to do. The reply is the first bullet point on the left. Do you know that there are some real society problems in the world, in your society? Poverty, hungry, sustainability issues, innovation challenges, these are all big problems. Can you take one of these, part of this, to think about how you do research to have an impact on them? And also from our view, we should ask ourselves, look at the kind of papers we publish, do we really come up with some new knowledge that can contribute to these kind of problems? Yeah. And we want to be able to create new knowledge. On the right-hand side, you can see. But the way we do research would have to change a lot. Instead of sitting on your desk and doing research using data far away from reality, you want to work with people, policymakers, managers, people to understand the problem. And then think about new methodologies to do research, more action research, participatory methodologies, citizen science, and also science. For example, these are ways in which we get closer to the problems with the people who actually experience the problem, and that would be the way, perhaps, for us to really change the way we think and we do research. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Chi, for your presentation. It is so useful. I like, in particular, the last slide where we can come up with ideas, studies which have actual real impact on the society. I think this is definitely the participants, the audience today can consider writing and contributing to your journal. Now, for those who just joined us, this is a webinar on COVID-19 insights from special issue guest editors. We just had Professor Chi to present about the types of papers, contribution to the special issue, to the journal which he edits. Now, moving on, let us invite our second speaker, Professor Dr. Samuel Foso Wamba. Over to you, Professor Samuel.
So thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So in this, I have two special issues. The first one is from the International Journal of Operation and Production Management. So next slide, please. On emerging technology in emerging situations. As you can see, we are 6 guest editors from various parts of the world with various backgrounds. So from the US, France, UK, Brazil. So we are well equipped to handle all your submissions. Next slide, please. So what are we looking in this special issue? Basically, we are looking for papers that are going to basically provide new capabilities and coordination mechanism on how to deploy and utilize emerging technology in emerging situations. We have also defined 3 main areas where we are looking for. Basically, we start with the context. So there are many contexts that you can use in your paper. It's not only the COVID-19. So you can also deal with natural disaster like hurricanes, tsunami, earthquake, mass migration. You can also develop your paper based on man-made disaster, terrorism, war, political unrest, and so forth. And also now disease outbreak and pandemic like COVID-19. So we have a more broader scope regarding the potential context of the study. You can even talk about what are the challenges in providing medical services during all these disasters. Next slide, please. So we have first the context. Okay, we have first the context that you need to take into consideration when developing your paper. Then you also need to, in the same paper, highlight the contribution of technologies in solving these issues. And then we have provided sample technologies that you can explore to tackle all these issues. The first one is artificial intelligence. How artificial intelligence will provide new capability to solve these emergency situations, how the coordination mechanism will be improved, how this will help to basically provide new capability after the disaster, how to solve conflict using artificial intelligence during disaster management operations. And then we're also thinking about blockchain. How can you actually use blockchain to enhance visibility and transparency during disaster management operations? We also think about big data, business analytics, and we have provided a couple of research questions that you can use to basically develop your own paper. And also social media. How can you use social media, for example, to enhance responses during disaster management? How can you use this to support operations? How can you use this to address some of the key issues related to natural and man-made disaster? Next slide, please. What about drone? What about 3D printing? How can you use 3D printing, for example, during disaster to basically develop resources, build resources, help develop, for example, in a region where there's very difficult to access in order to provide external resources? How can you use 3D printing to support point of care manufacturing for healthcare devices? How can you use the Internet of Things, for example, to alleviate human suffering during disaster management in order to basically provide real-time resources in areas where it's very difficult to move airplane, move resources? In this case, can we use drone to provide resources? Can we use drone to come and provide basic medical resources to alleviate suffering of people? But also, what are the ethical issues related to the use of drone in disaster operation relief? So these are sample technology that you can use. But we are also thinking about what happens if you are in a region where there's no any facility, medical facility. Can we, in those remote areas, develop strategies to do medical diagnostics in this remote area in order to better understand what's happening, in order to better track patient, in order to quickly assess and provide healthcare services in this remote area, in order to develop or test vaccine during emergency situations. So we have a variety of technologies, a variety of contexts, but what are we looking in terms of method? Next slide, please. So we are also thinking that even though we have a variety of contexts, we have a variety of technologies, we need to basically create a bundle using a good method. So for example, we are not looking for paper that are using simulation and modeling or just using secondary data only. We are not looking to this type of paper. We are looking for paper that are using empirical research method. It can be qualitative, or quantitative, using case study, survey, design science, action research, or you can also use mixed method. So the method should be there, very strong method as Professor Shi already presented, but you need to provide new insight. How are you actually contributing to the theory and the practice? It should be very, very obvious in your paper. You should highlight your contribution in bringing the operation and supply chain management field in a new level. So it should be obvious in your paper. We are also expecting paper that are using new framework, contributing to theory, or using theories and emphasizing in the context on how to see how this new technology is bringing new capability, new coordination mechanism in order to better understand this new technology in these emergency situations. So we are expecting papers that are actually bringing new insight by contributing not only in theory, but also in practice. So for the next paper, the next special issue, next slide, please. So first of all, these are the submission deadline. They are also available on the journal website. So you can already submit your paper, but the final due date is the end of November. And we are expecting basically to have only 2 rounds on this special issue. And all the paper that we expect to go through the first round, we will work together to bring this paper to the acceptance to the final rounds. So if you make it to the first round, we are expecting to work with you and with the whole guest editorial team to bring the paper to the last stage, which is the first, it will be in the 7th month of 2021. And we are also expecting to publish the paper online as they are accepted. That means if your paper is accepted by the end of, let's say by the end of 2000 this year, the paper will be published online. Next please. So the second special issue is really about bridging the gap between the theoretical research and practical research that has been done during this COVID-19. Because there's a lot of debate about what we are, our supply chain professionals were not equipped well with their skills to face the challenges that arise with the COVID-19. So in this special issue, next slide, please. So in this special issue, we have a team of 5 guest editors from different countries, UK, France, and the United States, with different background. And we are hoping to attract a lot of paper from your region. In order to get into this special issue, your paper should deal with some topics that we think are very relevant in order to understand how can we bridge this gap between theoretical research and practical research related to COVID-19. Next slide, please. So basically, what we expect to receive from potential contributor is what are the skill gap that we actually notice during the management of this COVID-19 in the context of supply chain. We saw in many countries where we have a lot of out of stock for basic supply. Why this happen? As a supply chain scholar, how can we avoid this in the future? What will be the set of skills that we need to develop to avoid this kind of situation in the future? What about the notion of agility, adaptability, alignment? We saw in previous study that these are the key success factor when we want to deal with global supply chain. How come this was not the case during this pandemic, during this COVID-19? What are the new mechanisms that we need to develop to further this 3A capability in the context of global supply chain? What will be the importance and the contribution of technologies in order to build more collaboration between supply chain partners to deal with this pandemic? What about resilience? What about using drones, as I told you from previous special issue? We are also thinking about, but how do we use all these new technologies not only to improve the efficiency, but also to build trust among global supply chain stakeholder during the pandemic? How do we actually build capability in terms of moving resources across the network during this pandemic? What will be the new measurement or new KPIs during pandemic? Are we going to use traditional KPIs and apply them in the context of pandemic? We saw that that cannot be true during a pandemic like COVID. If it's not the case, are we going to develop new KPIs that we are going to use during pandemic? What about the humanitarian operation during pandemic? What about information sharing? How are we going to share information during the pandemic situation like the COVID? What about the total quality management during a pandemic like COVID? Are we going to use the same way we do total quality management in the traditional supply chain as in the pandemic? So what about the costing? The costing, is it going to be the same? Or are we going just to say, don't care about the cost, just try to achieve the objective of our supply chain? So these are the topic that we are focusing more on for this special issue. Next slide, please. And then for this special issue, it's more open. You can already submit your paper, but the deadline is February 15, 2021. But we can already receive paper, and we expect to just go through maximum 2 rounds for this special issue. As Professor Shi just explained, you need to have a very good context. You need to find a good theory, not just replicating. You need to have a very strong theoretical contribution and a very strong practical contributions. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward for more discussion about these 2 special issues.
Thank you, Professor Samuel, for your presentation.
You're welcome.
It is so apparent that there are many questions which remain largely unanswered, and that presents opportunities for participants to come up with potential papers and consider submitting to these 2 special issues. So thank you so much for the presentation. Now, just a quick reminder, the video, the whole webinar will be recorded. The video, the materials which the speakers present today, and also the certificate will be sent to all the participants 3 days after the event. So now, without further ado, let us move on to the next presenter, Associate Professor Dr. Stephen McKenna. Over to you now. Professor Dr. Stephen, you need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now? How's that?
Yes, perfect. Perfect.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dr. Hiram, and welcome everybody. Thanks for inviting me here to talk about the special issue, personnel review special issue, which is going to be edited by myself and 5 of my colleagues. So we have a team of 6 academics from our people, culture, and organizations discipline in the School of Management at Curtin University here. So our entire team is Curtin University based. And one of the things that we've been doing since probably March of this year, right at the very early stage of the pandemic, is we launched a research program which includes not only Australia, but also Brazil, the UK, the United Arab Emirates, South Africa, and India, where we have 6 teams collaborating around the world that are looking very specifically at the implications for people management or human resources management, broadly defined, as a consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as we all know, the extent and the depth of the pandemic has been different in very different parts of the world. Of course, it's some countries have been hit much harder than others. So one of the things obviously that we want to explore there is the extent to which the differing circumstances that countries find themselves in with respect to COVID-19 is having a differential impact on certain aspects of the way, in our case, work is carried out and human resource management is carried out. So we've been on this program now for 6 months, and as a result of that, we thought that it might be a good idea to actually put together in personnel review, of course, a special issue which is not only necessarily concerned with the pandemic, but is more broadly concerned with the impact of a crisis, however it's defined, on the management of people in organizations. And so it happens that obviously the pandemic, COVID-19, has come along at a time where we're all very much focused on that particular crisis. But in terms of contribution, I think, to understanding the role of human resources management in crisis, it's important to perhaps understand it in a broader way. So if I could have the next slide, please. What we're looking for really in this special issue is 4 major aims, I think, that we have. The overall title is The Changing Role of Human Resource Management Through Crisis, and in particular from responding to a crisis situation and then into the process of recovery. So what is the role of human resources management there? Now, one of the things I think we've learned, and certainly in the project that we have ongoing, is that human resources management has played a very crucial role in issues such as business recovery, or more importantly at the moment, business continuity. If we look at things like working from home, remote working, the impact of those things on the management of performance, the impact of those things on the physical and particularly the mental well-being of people, HR has had a very crucial role, I think, in managing very many of these aspects and outcomes of the pandemic. So related to that, we have four major aims, I think. First is to develop a better understanding of the role of HRM in responding to crisis and in the process of organizational recovery. There is some material out there in the academic environment which is being produced, which has looked at human resource management in relation to crisis and recovery situations. But as in many fields, I think that we are all in, it's very kind of dissipated. It's very spread out. And so one of the things we're looking for here is to try to develop a more focused, perhaps, understanding of what the role of HRM might be in responding to crises and in recovery situations. We also want to look at and explore whether human resource management changes in post-crisis situations. So here, is this an opportunity for HR to kind of redefine itself, to create a different kind of people management in organizations? So as we look at what HR has had to do within organizations within the crisis situation, how has this led to perhaps a renewal or a rethinking of the role of HRM, particularly in the context of things like the relationship between compliance, which has historically been, of course, a very important and sometimes negative role of human resources management, towards a more agile human resources management, one that is more closely connected to the success of businesses and other types of organizations. We're also interested, thirdly, in exploring the interface specifically between business continuity and HR activity. So as you all know, and Professor Wamba there, certainly with respect to things like disasters and so on, you know, business continuity is clearly very crucial. And one of the things here, we want to focus specifically on what has been the role of HR in business continuity in very specific ways, and how has it contributed both negatively and positively, actually, to sustaining business during very difficult situations. And finally, we want also to start to have people perhaps think about conceptualizing HR in crisis and recovery situations. I've been in human resources management now for over 32 years, both in a commercial environment and in an academic environment. And to be honest, I've never seen human resources management professionals move so quickly as they have over the last 6 months. So, you know, that in itself suggests that with a sense of urgency, things can be done in this particular area very, very quickly. And I think that is a good lesson going forward out of the pandemic, that we can actually do things in the HR function very quickly. And if we don't have the push of a pandemic, then we just need to develop perhaps a sense of urgency. So how can we conceptualize HR perhaps in those different recovery circumstances and situations? Thanks. Could I have the next slide, please? So here's just a kind of list of the sorts of issues that could be dealt with in relation to the special issue. But this is, of course, by no means exhaustive. This is just some examples of the kind of things that people might be working on now, and be able to construct a paper around. So how has human resource management responded to crisis situations or a crisis situation? How has it been involved in business continuity and organizational recovery when that point comes? How has HR been involved in alterations to work and working practices? What was the role of HR there? What was the role of HR in different industries and different sectors? So one of the things we've found already is that human resources management has obviously had to develop different strategies and different ways of operating in hospitality and tourism, for example, than in mining, which are two very important sectors, of course, here in Western Australia. So, the way in which HR has to react and has had to react is going to be certainly not only affected by the general impact of the pandemic, but also very specifically industries, sectors and organizations will be affected differentially. So, for example, here in Western Australia, luxury hotels have largely been taken over in order to put people in a quarantine situation. So actually, businesses that were previously in luxury hotels and hospitality are now actually operating in the health sector. So that's a huge transition, and human resources is going to have a key part in doing that. So we've actually had industries and sectors almost change overnight from being in one sector to another. And that, of course, has to be managed and has potential important implications for the present and future. And also what barriers exist to prevent change. So this work, for example, could be how managers in organizations might have resisted remote working. And that might be related to issues of control and trust and so on. So we know that there is, for example, a lot of managers find it very difficult, both psychologically and in other ways, to manage remote staff, partly because they have, if they can't see them, they may have a problem believing that they're working, or there will trust issues and so on. So all of those more micro level issues are also things that we're interested in receiving papers about for the special issue. Next slide, please. Okay, so here, Dr. Hiram, when I spoke with William earlier and I wasn't quite sure what topic 2 was about, he sort of suggested to me that it was partly about, I think, the publishing plan for the special issue, but also something about my own sort of experience of kind of, I don't know, becoming a senior academic. I've become a senior academic simply because I've got older. That's a simple issue. There. I wish I was 32 and starting my career again, but I'm not. So anyway, what I would just a number of pointers, and some of these I think pick up on some of the points that have already been made by Professor Wamba and Professor Wong, which is first of all the academic world in which all of us now work. Is certainly very different from the academic world that I entered, hundreds of years ago, it seems now. I've had a very oscillating career, some of my time in commerce and some of my time in the academic environment. So when I did my undergraduate degree back in the 1970s, it was a very different environment. If you published one paper every 10 years, you were considered to be a genius. But now, of course, if you're not publishing 10 papers in 1 year, then you're considered to be lazy. So I suppose if there are young academics and PhD students listening to this, be aware of the fact that crafting an academic career in the modern world is competitive, and publications, as we know, are very important to develop your academic career. However, having said that, I think the second point is, a big question for me has always been, in some ways, how meaningful or useful is management research? And what I was really pleased to hear from Professor Wong and Professor Wamba is that I think now a lot of us are realizing that what we've got to produce in our academic research and in the papers that we publish are papers that can be read by both our academic colleagues, which is fine, but also managers can pick those journals up or look at those articles online, and actually they can understand what they're reading. And I think this is a key element of our special issue, and from what I've heard from also the special issues of others, we need managers to be able to read our research, to find it useful, and that's the real way in which we will begin to have our impact. So our impact is on changing the way in which managers do what they do, rather than worrying too much about the impact factor in and of itself. That's important, obviously, for an academic career, but at the same time, we all want to feel that we're having an impression and an impact on practitioners. as much, if not more than, our academic colleagues around the world. So, yeah, one of the things I think that's very important for people to know is that, you know, when we've done research and we publish it in good journals, find some other ways of disseminating it, get it out in all kinds of other forms and fora, blogs and all the rest of it, to make those, get those practical messages out. They're really important. I'm sure that your universities encourage you to do that. And that's what we do here at Curtin. And I would say to anyone who's listening now, always think about an impact beyond the impact factor, because that's really what really I think we are as academics are about. That's very important. Think about what you want to contribute, and you know, we have to have a mix between theory development, but also I think influencing the practice of management, and not only in terms of making businesses more successful, but also just in terms of the ethical practice of management, which is obviously a really important issue. I would say to people, research local problems. So in the context of the special issue, let's assume that management practice and ideas are local, which I think they are. You know, we need to understand management in its context, and not with some kind of universal idea that there is an idea about what management is that will fit everywhere. And that's particularly the case, of course, in HR. Human resource management is a very local activity, and you know, it's important, I think, for us to know how that has been affected through crises in different parts of the world. And the other thing I'd always say to young people in business schools, academics, and I think Professor Wong has said this, spend more time working with business, connecting with businesses, doing applied research, because that's key. You know, you can't, in my view, you can't teach business unless you know businesses and so on. That's obvious, but you know, I think that certainly that's the sort of thing that will inform, I think, the special issue. Next slide, please.
Professor Stephen, you have 1 minute to wrap up your presentation.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. So here's, we're primarily looking for qualitative work, innovative empirical studies, and so on. And here I'm just repeating some of the things I think that both Professor Wamba and Wong have said, which is qualitative research is a niche in and of itself. And so make sure that when you do this kind of research, that you apply standards of rigor that are appropriate to qualitative methods. And anybody can, to get a fuller picture of this slide, anybody can connect with me, Dr. Hiram or you, and I can go through that more fully. All right, and one last slide, which is really just re-emphasizing, I think, the issue of impact. As my colleagues have already mentioned, get your research out, get connected to business, and make sure that the impact that you have on organizations and society is the key intention of your research, not some sort of side benefit. Don't worry about making sure you get those academic publications alone. The important thing is to have an impact beyond your office in your business school. Okay, just in time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Stephen. Now, I just told Professor Samuel, Professor Chi before we started that 50 minutes is not doing any of you justice. There are so much that you can share, and not only the aims and scope, you know, what types of papers the special issue is looking at. We appreciate Professor Stephen for sharing your experience. We should, especially those young academics, we should look, I mean, obviously impact factor is important, but we should look beyond that to do something which is of practical relevance to the society. So we appreciate that experience, that sharing. Now, last but definitely not the least, we would like to invite Dr. Stewart to give us his insights about the special issue, the journal he's editing. Over to you.
Thank you. Okay, can you hear me well?
Yep.
So
perfect.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the professors Professor Chi and Dr. Stephen and Samuel, Professor Samuel, sharing the experience and the requirement and also the expectation on their special issues on COVID-19. And basically, my special issue actually lie with the library high tech. And basically, the call for paper has been launched a couple of months before. So at the time when we launched the call for paper, actually there are about 311,000 staff, and there are about 4.6 million confirmed cases in the world. But now I think after a couple of months, actually the figures are actually climb up significantly. Basically, there are already 900,000 staff in the world, and actually the confirmed cases, they are over 2,007 million confirmed cases in the world already. So basically, the spreading of this virus, the pandemic is actually is terrible and it's widespread. And basically, my location is in Hong Kong, and it's very close to the origin of the virus, of the pandemic. And actually, the virus started off in Wuhan, in central China, and then in December last year, and it was spreading out rapidly to the world, and there are cases spreading out to the south, to Hong Kong, Singapore, and Taiwan, and also there are cases spreading out to Europe, to Spain, to Italy, and basically, and then the virus also spreading out further to the US and the UK. And as everyone here know, I think the case in the US is terrible. Actually, there are over 90,000 people die in the pandemics already. So, and I hope the reason that we have these special issues, and the reason is we want to share experience from these developed countries, which was hit by the virus early at the early stage, and we hope this experience can be consolidated and shared to the countries, say for example like in Africa, and these countries are hit later, and right now in Africa, I think we know that the pandemic is spreading out rapidly, and the infected cases is going up rapidly as well. And in the Northeast Asia, here in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, in China, the cases are actually settling down, and basically in Hong Kong, actually we have less than 100 cases. In Taiwan, similar situation. Actually, they are doing well in preventing the virus spreading out in the country, and they closed the border early. And on the other hand, in Australia, I think it is especially in Victoria. I think Professor Stephen know about that. The state is actually hit by the coronavirus heavily, and they are undergoing the stage 4, and actually they closed the border, and actually the closing the border actually has a great impact to the supply chain. And so our journal, Library High Tech, is not just accepting paper from the library domain. Actually, we also accept paper from the information systems and healthcare informatics, healthcare information systems, also in the high tech areas like pervasive computing, and also like RFID, and how to use these pervasive computing technology in fighting the pandemic. It's also very useful to sharing to the rest of the world. And basically, we have accepted, we have actually received many quality papers already. And I think we can go to the next slide. Yeah, go back one slide, I think. The deadline of the submission deadline is close, and we may extend the deadline by a month, and in order to accept more quality papers. And basically, we also welcome early stage researcher, like the PhD students, to submit their paper to our journals, to this special issue. And so basically, I teach undergraduate students as well as postgraduate students. And actually, we form some research groups with the undergraduate students, and basically they do case studies, research within the community, and also they do literature review and to survey the way how other North Asia country fighting the pandemics. And they actually has written some very good papers. And also for the postgraduate students, actually they have their belief, and also they have learned about theories and how to apply those theory in the research. And for example, like social science theory, like the technology acceptance model, and the theory of claim behavior. Actually, these are the very famous theory, and they apply this theory and in studying the acceptance, how the people use the technology, like the information system, the sharing the health informations, and also they study the behavior on sharing the informations to their community. And also, let's go to the next slide, please. Yeah, and so as I mentioned, I think this, please move to the next slide. Yeah. So basically, this is the timeline of how this virus, how this pandemic is spreading out to the world. This is the timeline in the US and the UK region. Basically, it's identify what happened when the border was closed in the country, and when the quarantine was exercised in the border. And basically, some of the students asked us, how to study the story, how to study the case, and under the COVID-19 context. And basically, I tell them, reading the timelines is the good way to find the story. And basically, let's move on to next slide. Yeah. So we can see how actually the impact on various business segments, like the supply chain, transportations, logistics, and also like how about the energy demand, retail, and also the consumer behavior. And on the other hand, we also see we can also observe the behavior of the people, how they actually find, locate, and share the health informations. And behind the informatics, there are infrastructure, IT infrastructures, and also information system behind to facilitate the information sharing and seeking. So, and also during the shutting down the border, and during the time that the people staying home to work from home. And basically, actually, you can see, people start, use the e-commerce things and the online things, significantly. And so, company invest less in the traditional instrument like marketing, like on TV media, on publications like books and like other channels, but actually they increase the investment on digital marketing. And so there may be we also welcome people from these business area to share the information, to share the findings about So how actually a company investing in e-marketing, and how the users in their customers behave in front of these new channels, in front of these different medias. And also let's move on to next slide. Yeah, so initially we can identify several business segments that are hard hit by the pandemic, like airlines. Basically there are no flights, and so the crews are actually staying on the ground, and retails, and as I think Dr. Stephen know very well that the stage 4 closure. Actually the retail store are basically closed. They are only allowed to take the orders electronically. So this is what we call click and take away. And also other segments like energy, so and also construction and the telecommunication as well. So let's move on to next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, as I mentioned briefly about the state of disaster declared in the Victoria, Australia, and what actually is the impact to the supply chain. So and also on the impact on the supermarket, the retail segment, and also the construction industry as well. For example, like the warehousing and distribution centers. So the workforce in this area are only limited to 2/3 of the normal workforce to work on the site. And so the e-commerce actually business in not only Australia but also in Asia, like North Asia, in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and also in the US, has grown significantly because actually people staying home, and they order things, and they in the holiday or in the weekend they used to go out to go shopping in the shopping mall, but actually they don't do this as frequent as before. So they start ordering things, not just food, but also other necessary things like the groceries. They order from the website of the supermarkets and from the department stores. So next slide, please. So what actually is the impact? The other segment that are impacted by the pandemic is the energy segment. So we can see that there is a significant drop in the demand of the energy, and 25%. And but interestingly, there is some interesting finding that from our students study in this segment. So they find that the global energy demand actually on the renewable energy has been rising by 1% over the year, and driven by the 5% increase in the use of renewable electricity. So what is the reason behind this growth? The reason is the operating expenses to obtain these renewable energy is lower than the traditional expenditure fossil fuels energy. And for example, like solar energy and the hydrogen fuel cell. And basically, the hydrogen fuel cell is obtained by the electrolysis of water, and sometimes, in some cases, obtained by biofuel. And so the lower operating cost is more attractive, and that's why some energy group in the Europe urge the European Union to prioritize the renewable energy to high priority, and putting more money on the research and also the implementations, and in the future. And next slide, please. So I think every one of you here actually from the education domain, from the higher education domain. So you all know actually in the last semester, basically there are low classes, face-to-face classes, and we all actually conduct the lectures and lessons online using Zoom or whatever online tools to conduct the lecture. And initially, actually, it may be difficult to get involved of the student to participate in the class, but when they get used to use this kind of remote educational tools, and basically we conduct the case studies and the project presentations as usual without any problem. So basically, some of the university in Hong Kong has already announced that in the coming semester, they still stick to the online method to deliver the lecture, And but on the other hand, the secondary school and also primary school actually will resume the face-to-face class in, I think, the end of September and October. So hopefully the pandemic in Hong Kong, the identified cases in Hong Kong can be further reduced. And in the coming semester, we are looking forward to have the face-to-face class again. Okay, next slide, please.
Dr. Stewart, you have about 1 minute to wrap up.
Okay, so
Thank
the
you.
last segment I want to share with you is the retail segment. Okay, so I think historically, basically, we have a lot of experience using the pervasive computing technology and also the wearable technology to automate the processes on the retail segment. I think this kind of experience is very useful to fight the pandemic, especially people actually it's actually scaring of the human touch in the general environment. So basically, these kind of pervasive computing technology and the wearable technologies can help a lot in automating the process, no matter helping the customer to choose the product or helping them to check out to pay the money at the counter. And what is can I go back to the deadline page of my special issue? Yeah, the deadline. Yeah, so the deadline of submitting paper to this special issue is 30th of October. So the deadline actually is close. So I encourage the researcher, especially the early stage researcher. So if you are doing your PhD thesis or writing paper for your PhD, and I encourage you to submit the paper to my journal and sharing your experience on. We welcome different kinds of research method, a qualitative, quantitative, case study, and this is the end of my presentation, and thank you very much for having me here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stewart, for your presentation. Now, there are actually many questions from the participants, but when I look at all these questions, some of these questions have in fact been addressed by the speakers during their presentation. So worry not, this webinar is recorded and the video will be sent to all of you 3 days after the event, and you could watch the video again to get the explanation again. Secondly, some of these questions are actually addressed in the description of the special issues, the types of papers that the editors are looking for. So again, the slides will be made available to all of you 3 days after the event. You will know the special issues, the journals better. And some of these questions are quite personal. So I will encourage you to contact the guest editors directly, whether topic A is okay, whether topic B is acceptable. I think it will be beneficial for you to contact them. Just tell any of them that I'm one of the participants. I believe our guest speakers will definitely entertain and guide you from there. Now, because of time constraint, I have one question for all the speakers. And I only need one advice from each of you. Looking at the questions, many of them are PhD students, young scholars. we know the importance of context. In ASEAN, in emerging countries, definitely we have good context. We know the importance of theoretical grounding. We know the importance of methodological clarity. If you have one advice for postgraduate students in this region, they have context, they have wonderful story, but how would they be able to craft the story, to craft the paper, to stand a good chance to be considered publication in your special issue? If you have one advice for the postgraduate students, for the young researchers, what would it be? Professor Chi, I know it is quite a sudden, what would be your advice to them?
Okay, I think my advice is try to incorporate the context in your theorizing arguments. There are some special issues about how to use context in your writing and argument. In AMJ, I believe there is one special issue about West meet East. How do you incorporate East cultural context into your theorizing? There are a lot of grounded general theories that apply to the Western world. Well, there might be one or two contexts that you actually can be used to modify, adjust the theoretical arguments in the context of what you're doing. Yes, that actually will be very interesting. Second thing is that try to use mid-range theory instead of grand theory. Mid-range theory is the one that allows you to incorporate context into your argument.
Thank you, Professor Chi. Professor Samuel, over to you. What would be your advice to the postgraduate students and young scholars?
So thank you very much. So first of all, as Professor Wong just said, there are some good paper on how to integrate context into your own study. So I would advise them to go and look at this paper on different ways to integrate the context. And the other advice will be, you should write an interesting paper. The paper should be interesting. So you need to engage. When you are engaging with reviewer, and they can see that, you know, there's something that is exciting in this paper, then you have all the chances to have and revise and resubmit. Engaging in terms of having a practical problem. This is a practical problem that I'm trying to solve. This is a theoretical problem that I'm trying to solve. And, you know, building an interesting story around the topic. That's what will make your paper get through a revise and resubmit.
Thank you so much. Professor Stephen, over to you. What will be your advice?
Thanks, Dr. Hiram. Two things. One is context is obviously important. One of the things that's important to me in my work has been the use of institutional theory to understand that you know, the arrangements in any particular country, not region, any particular country are different. Regulative, normative, cultural, cognitive. So so have a look to see whether or not you can fit the context into something like that, and do not focus simply on the issue of culture, which often happens. You know, some kind of rather simplistic view of culture, often referring to people like Hofstadter and so on. That is too simplistic and not helpful. The other thing I would say with qualitative work, you've got to focus on depth in your analysis. That's very important. Not just describe that data, but you have to, and I think Professor Wong made this point earlier, you've got to have some sophisticated analysis of that qualitative data. That's really important.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Stewart. What about your advice?
Because actually COVID-19 outbreak is a very new experience. Everybody here academic understand that, okay, when we publish a paper, actually we need to go through the peer review process, which takes time. So if you want students, especially for PhD students, don't just find the literatures, do the literature review on academic papers. try to find some industry report that can help them to review the insight from the industry, different business segment, like the consulting report from Big Four company. They have a very large consulting team around the group. So, for example, like KPMG, can I speak out of their name? So, actually, you can find the detailed report from Big Four companies. Yep. They are very helpful to help, especially young researchers, to help you to understand what is happening in the world in different countries around the globe.
Thank you so much for all the speakers, for all your insights about the special issues on COVID-19, but also on crisis in general, and how we could learn from these crises and how we could continue, perpetuate the discussions, the lessons, to better prepare for more uncertainties in the future. So we have come to the end of the webinar, but before that, we would like to invite the senior publisher from Emerald Insights, Joe Jones, to give a few words. Are you there, Joe?
I am, and I was actually here earlier, Dr. Ting, so I do apologise. I was having technology issues, but we now have the camera and the microphone working. So very quickly, just wanted to say thank you so much to you as editors and guest editors for giving of your time to us. It's really helpful, and I'm sure the researchers that have joined in today will have really benefited from hearing your expertise and your experiences and sharing advice as to how they can take their careers and their writing forward. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to everybody that has attended. It's fantastic to have so many people engaged in the presentations, and I really hope that you'll take away some real insights into how you can potentially work with Emerald going forward. And I'd also just like to reiterate, I think one of the really core messages that came out of the sessions today was around the need to think about the impact that your research can potentially have out there in the real world. So it's obviously it's about looking at what has been done, but really focusing on what can be done. And thinking about who are the stakeholders that can make the positive changes in society, that can change the policy, that can make the changes in the workplace, that can take these things forward, and really start to have an impact politically, societally, and in those communities. And I think also there were some really key points in terms of what that impact means. So in terms of how you solve something, how you challenge something, how you change something. And as Professor Samuel said, in terms of making it interesting, is it engaging? Are you going to get somebody's attention, grab it and find and take them forward? Do they want to find out more about what you've got to say? So I think if you take all these messages on board, you have the opportunity to realise the full potential of the research that you're doing, and get the most out of it. So thank you very much to everybody that's been involved. As mentioned, I am a senior publisher at Emerald, and I look after the operations, logistics and quality titles. Professor Chi is one of our editors on IJPDLM, so thank you, Chi, for coming. And we have Stephen on the PR personnel review, which is a different portfolio, but I think also just emphasises the fact that, you know, research and business is interdisciplinary, and there are lots of different areas that feed in. So just bear that in mind in terms of co-creation as well. And thank you also to Samuel and to Dr. So for joining as well. Okay, thank you, Dr. Ting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, for your encouraging words. We have Dr. Dawn Benante and Dr. Julius Menelis from UpCore and P. Hersey to give a few concluding words as well. They are our partners and we are grateful for their support. So over to you, Dr. Don.
Thank you, Dr. Ting. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Okay, good. It is my honor to thank the men and women behind this highly significant event. Appreciation also goes to Emerald Publishing East Asia for inviting us to be one of the partner organizations in this activity. To all our brilliant speakers and moderator, thank you for sharing your experience and expertise. You might be wondering what UpCore is. UpCore, or the Asia Pacific Consortium of Researchers and Educators, is a professional organization of academics and researchers that engages in collaborative, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and cross-disciplinary researches and activities in Asia Pacific region. It has a mission of promoting research excellence among its members to strengthen the research capacity of higher education institutions and establish formal linkages and networks with educational and research organizations. And of course, to attain the academic and research excellence and social responsibility, both in the national and global context. UpCore believes that research activities in higher education institutions should not be limited to mere creation of knowledge. It is incumbent upon higher education institutions to ensure translating research-based knowledge into practical utilization and dissemination. We should not forget that despite the new normal brought about by the pandemic, our responsibility for creating and sharing knowledge and forging partnership should never stop. The situation we are facing right now should not deter us, but instead challenge and inspire us more to strengthen our efforts and approaches for a more visible, dynamic, and action-oriented partnership. The primary goal of this webinar is not only to provide avenue for active publication engagement, but more importantly, allow leveling up research dissemination and publication in high-impact journals. Remember, the quest for knowledge has been there since the beginning of time, but knowledge only becomes valuable when shared, disseminated, and applied to benefit humankind. This is what I guess Dr. Stephen saying. Research impact beyond the impact factor. On behalf of the executive officers and board of directors of UpCore, I thank all of you for participating in this webinar. And to our UpCore members, I encourage to submit your papers for possible publication in these Emerald journals. Next slide, please. And also, I would like to use this opportunity to invite all of you to participate in our virtual conference, the UpCore 2020 virtual conference, this coming December 2 to 4, with the theme Embracing Change, Forging Ahead. And to know more about the UpCore, you can visit our website. Next slide, please. So then, thank you, Dr. King. Thank you to all our speakers. Thank you, Emerald Publishing, for being part of, for inviting us to be part of this wonderful activity. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Can we invite Dr. Julius Meneses to say a few words?
A pleasant afternoon to everybody, especially to our esteemed speakers and to the moderators, Associate Professor Dr. Hiram Ting, also to the Emerald Publishing. A pleasant afternoon to everybody and the participants. We are very much grateful that we were able to be partners of this very relevant seminar, which focus on the special issues in COVID-19 insights from the special issue guest editors. And may I say something about our organization? The Philippine Higher Education Research Consortium, or formerly known as the Philippine Association of State Universities and Colleges National Capital Region Research Consortium, is a professional organization of academics and researchers that engages in collaborative, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and cross-disciplinary researches and activities. It has a mission to strengthen the research capacity of higher education institutions in the country and establish linkages and networks with educational institutions and to attain its goal of academic and research excellence and social responsibility both in the national and global context. It brings together also academicians, researchers, and educational leaders across disciplinary interests to engage in research and development. It has been formulated by the 7 state universities in the National Capital Region located in Metro Manila. And I am also encouraging all the participants and the members of PHRC to publish their works, especially those works that are somewhat very important to the society, that has very impact to the society, to publish it to Emerald Publishing. Thank you very much once again, Emerald Publishing, and to Dr.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Again, as a reminder, as some participants are still very concerned about a few things. Number one, the webinar has been recorded. The video will be sent to you 3 days after the event. All the slides with details about the speakers, the special issues, the journals will be also sent to you 3 days after the event. And not to forget, your certificate will also be sent to you 3 days after the event. So worry not, all will be sent to you in due course. Now, on behalf of Emerald Publishing and all the partners, we would like to thank all the speakers for sparing your valuable time to share insights about the special issues, about COVID-19 and crisis in general. This is definitely not the last time we meet. We will definitely meet again. And even though crisis is not something desirable, but crisis breeds innovation, creativity, and today we learned it actually breeds collective effort to produce more practical research, good research that would benefit, that would have positive impact on the society. So we look forward to see all of you. Also, thank you to all the participants for your time, for joining this webinar. We hope you find this webinar useful in some ways. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you to all the speakers.
Thank you, Sir William.
Thank you, Dr. Stuart. Thank you, Joe.
Jones. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe Jones. Bye-bye, Dr. Stuart. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye-bye.